Please welcome our dear friend, Bob Just.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter. And thank you, Fred, for your comments. Very touching. Very touching, Isaiah 61. It's just a great honor to be here to tell the founding chapter of NCS, and greetings from the Manhattan chapter, to tell you all about Birthday, which was launched in New York City thanks to NCS. So that not an easy thing to develop something in the Northwest and then come to New York City and have it launched there, and that happened because of our organization. So we stand on your shoulders, absolutely. Honestly, it's a great honor to be here and talk to you guys. I think that NCS as a national movement is one of the truly most important things going on in the country, in the Christian movement, because of its emphasis on manhood and fatherhood and the things that we represent to our society as men, and especially as Christian men. So thank you very much for the invitation. My problem with Birthday, it's interesting. Actually, it's such a simple concept, makes it almost harder to explain, because we look at it and we say, well, an ice cream sundae and birthday wishes in public schools, mostly public schools, what's that about? And how can that have, where's the gospel in that? How can that have impact? Because it just seems so simple. And we forget, talking about, Isaiah 61:1, the brokenhearted, we forget how many broken hearts are out there. And that's a lot of really what this is about, is that aspect. So I use 5 short stories to explain Birthday. The impact of Birthday is really the point. And I hope those stories will be helpful to you personally, because they dig a little under the surface of what Birthday is and what so many of us go through as children. So my first story is kind of a silly story. Nothing like speaking to the founding chapter of NCS and beginning with a silly story, but there is a serious part of it. So I was in boarding school when I was young. My parents were divorced, and I was in boarding school from 5 years old to 9 years old. But after that, I was very privileged to go to 2 famous private schools in New York City. Dalton was a co-ed school, very progressive, which I went to in middle school. But then I went to Trinity School starting in 8th grade, when my father and stepmother won custody of me. And they applied to Trinity, and so I'm a radical difference between Dalton and Trinity. Trinity was founded in 1709. When I went there, it was all male. It was chapel every morning, tie and jacket, call your teacher sir. It was very formal. It was, in many ways, really the exact opposite of Dalton. But as a boy from a broken family, it was what I needed. And I had played football at Dalton, and so, I went out for football in 8th grade. But then when 9th grade came, my parents had read something in the New York Times, about, playing high school football and how the older kids are much bigger than the younger kids. And so they forbade me from going out for football in 9th grade. And I developed an attitude of fragility. I had a sense that I was fragile. No one ever said that to me. I was tall but very thin. But I developed this attitude that unconsciously infected me, really, for my life. It's not that it stopped me from doing anything that I can remember, but it was an attitude that kind of infiltrated my thinking. And then, amazingly, several years ago, I broke my wrist. Pretty bad break. And I had to have a plate put on my wrist, an operation, the whole thing. And at one point, I'm in the doctor's office, and the doctor says, yeah, you have such big bones. Even my biggest plate was barely enough. And I cannot tell you the impact that had on me. It was, I don't know how to describe it. It was like someone saying, did you realize you were of royal blood? What? The idea that I had big bones when my entire life, high school, college, through all the maturity and development and the Christian walk and all of the things that I did in my life, I had this unconscious sense of vulnerability, of being fragile, because I wasn't strong enough to go out for football in ninth grade. I would have never consciously said that, but when he said that I had such big bones, it was stunning to me. And I think that kids are so impressionable. We, human beings, are so impressionable, of course, especially kids. It's an expression you don't hear much anymore because the culture is very casual about what we expose children to. But children are very impressionable, and there's a spiritual battle, really. There's a spiritual battle for our attitudes, and it's a vicious fight. Because a child can develop an attitude. I've given you a kind of silly version of it, but there are some very heavy and serious versions of it. My wife of 46 years believed she wasn't lovable because she had an alcoholic mother. Wendy used to tell me she'd be pulling her mother out of bars when Wendy was 10 years old. She had a psychologically abusive father, and she and friends of hers and I think that she was molested by a neighbor. She had a blank for her early childhood. And the impact of that, the subtle, destructive impact of that, can last a lifetime, as it did for me with the silliness of not being able to play football in ninth grade. It's such a serious thing, and I know many of you have journeyed in this. And, Wendy grew up in Menlo Park and Carmel, California. She lived in Pebble Beach. She had a privileged life. I had a privileged life as a Manhattan kid going to prep school. So we both had that blessing. It is a blessing. But underneath, we were both brokenhearted in our different ways. Excuse me. And if you'd seen me as a senior at Trinity School, you would have said, yeah, look at that young man, Christian, on his way, great education, privilege, and everything. You wouldn't have known what I was going through personally, which will be what my first video is about. As I mentioned, my parents were divorced when I was 5 years old. Now, there's no judgment in this. I loved my parents. In fact, I wouldn't have changed it. I told them, back in the 90s that I wouldn't have it be any different. When I was a Christian host, my co-host used to say something that I've always remembered, and that is, whatever God saves you from, he turns you around and makes you a minister to, very often. And so I want to emphasize that despite the fact of talking about this silent brokenness, thank you very much, Paul, thank you. Because of this silent brokenness, that there's no judgment in this. And we're called to honor our parents. I love my parents. As I get older, I realize the blessing that God gave me with my mother and gave me with my father, and how remarkable it was. And I thank him continually for that blessing. So we rise above all those pains, but those pains are real. And so anyway, I write still for WorldNet Daily and American Thinker. I've also written for Fox News, but mostly I write for WorldNet Daily. And they asked me, they knew about my background as an adult child of divorce, and they asked me to write a column about it, which got a lot of attention. It was called Son of Divorce. And Dr. D. James Kennedy, Coral Ridge Ministries, which was the big influence on my early Christian walk, just a tremendous blessing in my life. And I had contact with him. And they read the article and they did a short, 11-minute documentary about it. So I'm going to be showing you just a few minutes of that documentary, but this will give you an idea of what the truth was, what was going on behind this young man that might have looked like a shiny penny when he was in, senior in high school, but in reality, this is what was going on. So let's just play that video.
We've all heard it said about divorce, children are resilient, they'll bounce back. But is that true? Right now, I want you to meet some adult children of divorce and hear from them firsthand how the breakup of their parents has affected their own lives.
Well, my mother left my father when I was 5 years old. At that moment, things go on inside you that you can't put words to. Your whole reality shifts. It's like an earthquake in your life, an absolute earthquake.
It's been a long time since his parents divorced, but radio host and columnist Bob Just has begun speaking out on a subject that many in the mainstream media do not want to talk about: the long-term effects of divorce on children.
The thing about being an adult child of divorce, the most devastating thing about it, is that you don't know the damage that's been done to you. And you're surrounded with a culture that doesn't tell you. Nobody talks about it.
When WorldNet Daily asked him to write an article about his personal point of view, it brought many issues to the surface.
The impact of it is hard to put to words, especially if you don't understand the Christian worldview.
Reaching back through the decades, his Christian worldview helped him understand what happened.
If you don't understand the essential principle that a man and woman come together under God and are made one flesh, and out of that joining comes a child, and when that one flesh is split, it has a massive impact on the child. We were designed to have a mommy and a daddy, a mother and a father who are the only authority you know. And when that authority splits, it splits the order in your life, it splits the security in your life, and it leaves you not knowing who you are. That's really what happens. You begin a process of not knowing who you are. And then you start to compensate for that by covering up in any number of ways, which I certainly did in my life. 1/4 of everyone under the age of 44 is an adult child of divorce.
When my parents divorced, it just created in me a chronic state of fear.
To this day, I have a fear of failure, a fear of conflict.
Constant mistrust. Fear of being rejected or abandoned.
I never saw it coming, and I just remember one day my dad wrapped us 3 girls in his arms, and he was crying and we were crying, and he said, "I'm leaving," and he left, and everything changed.
It's still an issue, and it's still painful, and it still hurts.
I have a constant fear of not being good enough, a constant fear of giving my best, and it won't mean anything.
I would say divorce is a tragedy.
What is the profile of a child of divorce? Expectations of failure, fear of loss, fear of betrayal, fear of change, fear of loneliness, those kinds of things.
The research is very, very dramatic on this point, that not only does divorce have effects into adulthood, but the effects get worse and worse into adulthood. And here's this.
Glenn Stanton, author of Why Marriage Matters, is the director of social research at Focus on the Family in Colorado.
Judith Wallerstein, the key researcher on this issue, extended her, at first, 5-year study into ultimately a 25-year study, following these kids of divorce into adulthood. And she says that divorce is a cumulative process. It has a cumulative effect, culminating in adulthood.
As children of divorce become adult children of divorce and then get older, get into their 20s and 30s, the problem they're facing, the internal problem they're facing gets worse and gets more apparent. So you add that trauma with the trauma of being separated from your parents in boarding school from 5 years old to 9 years old. I went to 2 different boarding schools. But the second story I have to tell you is a great blessing. Had begun the process of my healing was certainly an early important moment in that process. And that was when I was at Pleasantville Cottage School, which still exists. It's up the river in Pleasantville. The Pleasantville police came to visit us and celebrate the holiday with us. And they gave us each a cardboard box with cookies and toys. We sat it on our lap. And they put on a show for us. And back then, law enforcement was all male. So I'm watching this, and it's like stunning to me. Here are these big, burly, law enforcement. They're men, and they're there for me, right? And it had a profound impact on me because it said to me, and this has to do with you, and has to do with NCS, and it's, in my view, the significance of NCS, the power of Father blessing, the power of the blessing from the creatures that God made, called men. And of course, women have their blessing too, but in this particular story, I was so blessed by those men because what they said to me as an 8-year-old, they only came once that I remember. I call it single moment ministry, the profound impact you can have on a young person for only, they couldn't have been on campus more than an hour, hour and a half. They put on a little show for us, they gave us the gifts, but they represented a father spirit to me that said that the father spirit was something more than my father. My father was dutiful. My mother left him. She got custody. She put us in boarding school, my brother and me. They put us in boarding school. My father, nothing to do with it. He was dutiful. He visited when he could. But the point is, in a child's mind, children don't understand those things. And so these men said something to me. They said that father was a bigger thing than my own father. And it pointed up. It eventually pointed up to our Father in heaven. And the way I describe it, because birthday has so much to do with this. This is why that's the second story of the 5 stories I want to tell you. Because when we do birthday, we don't allow teachers or parents to do birthday. The point of birthday is that it's strangers that are coming into the school. So every child has their circle of affection that they accept. A couple of friends, certainly, parent or two, maybe a teacher, a near relative, but they have that circle where they expect affection. But we're coming from outside the boundaries of their knowing, right? We're expressing affection, honoring them from outside that boundary. And it's shocking because it says to them, wait a minute, there's something bigger going on here than what I know. And that is a very important ministerial moment. It was a huge moment for me. I was so blessed to experience it personally because I know the impact, as I say, single moment ministry. You men and the women do the elementary schools in birthday. The men do the high schools, I call community fathers, community mothers, and in middle school is done by one or the other or both. But the point is you come into the school and you're serving them an ice cream sundae, you're celebrating everyone's birthday on the same day, and you're looking at them like Jeremiah 29, God has a plan for you. You can't proselytize, of course, in the public schools, but you can treat them like what they are, unique creatures. We put up a sign, and even science says this, of course. The sign says, there's never been another you, and there never will be again. Happy birthday. So they, may not be believers. They may know nothing about it, as I knew nothing about it when I was young. But they sense something's going on, and it raises their sights to a higher truth than what they know. Very powerful impact, and it's stunning, some of the responses that we get from the kids, and that's one of the stories I'll be telling you. So that's single moment ministry. And the other thing that's very powerful about birthday is a gender honoring ministry. So, as I say, the concerned fathers, community fathers. I never usually say men or women. When I'm talking to the schools, it's always community mothers, community fathers. And our group is Concerned Families, is Fathers, Mothers, Youth. Our motto is family and community. And what it is it's expressing fatherhood and motherhood in proper biblical relationship and youth pulling alongside us. And I was asked to write an article about this by NYC Religions of how my work and our work in Oregon might apply to New York City, where I was born and raised. And so I finished that article in July, and it's on bobjust.com if you'd like to read it. It's called Community Fatherhood and Motherhood, Rethinking Neighborhood Safety and Civility. So it's an effort to re-knit the social fabric by way of the powerful truth of fatherhood and motherhood, the powerful spiritual truth of that. And so if you'd like to read that, that's the bigger picture. Birthday is one of our projects. And it's right now it's a standalone movement. You know, it stands alone in New York City. But anyway, all right, so the gender honoring thing is incredible. It's like when I entered Trinity School as a secular Jew, I walk into the school founded in 1709 with all the traditions and, you know, and the marble stairway on the left that had pictures of the headmasters going back to the 19th century with beards. And it was very sober. All my teachers were male. The atmosphere was sober Christian, training young boys to be men, to be Christian men, and to be leaders. If Teddy Roosevelt had walked into my school with me, he would have said, bully, you know, young boys being trained to be strong, you know, muscular Christian leaders. And I looked at this as a kid coming just from a progressive co-ed school. My teacher at Dalton, one of my teachers in Mrs. Alford, we called Alfie. That's how informal it was. Trinity, it's call your teacher sir, Mr. They call you by your last name to honor your family. So I was Just or Mr. Just. It was a powerful difference. But here's the thing. I don't know anything about Christian doctrine. I'm secular Jewish, you know. And I walk into this school and I know if this is what Christianity is, I'm interested. Because I felt at home. I was being treated like what God created me to be. And by 16, I was baptized and confirmed a Christian. So those two things about single moment ministry, how the impact you can have with a brief contact, and gender honoring ministry. All right, so the three more stories. When I was at NYU Film School, I was very cynical about birthdays, which is probably, I'm guessing, is typical of kids from divorce because, you know, when your birthday comes, do I go with dad? Do I go with mom? Either way, I feel I'm only half myself. You know, any special event is difficult, as some of you know. There are millions of us who are adult children of divorce. So I was very cynical about birthdays. Oh yeah, another year's passed, you get cake, happy birthday, and you know. And my wife, bless her, she said she loved birthdays, and she said, "You don't get birthdays at all. Birthdays are a celebration that person's alive." And it was like it turned me around on a dime, and that was the seed. That was the seed of birthday. One of the many, many blessings that my life, my wife gave me. That was a big one, certainly. So the second story, the fourth story now that I want to tell you, there are two more. Fourth story is the impact you can have. So we have a testimonial video, and so this is talked about on the testimonial video. One of our board members out west of the Concerned Fathers Executive Board, and we were at our biggest high school, 1,800 students, and the men were kind of shy about it. You know, the women did the elementary schools, that makes sense. The middle schools, that makes sense. But high school, you know, I mean, is this going to work at a high school level? You know, and well, it was a huge success. The kids just melted, and so Alan, our board member, Alan Lawrence, was serving ice cream sundae to a senior girl. And he's, you know, talking to her, happy birthday, and here's, so how are you enjoying the day? And she looks at him and she says, "This is the best day of my life." Now, ice cream sundae and birthday wishes from 40 guys, 40 men, Christian men, and a few law enforcement with us, as you'll see on the video. It was stunning. Stunning to Alan. When Alan was talking to the membership about this experience, he started weeping because he could not imagine that brokenheartedness, that brokenness, which is really what this is about and why it's so great what Fred was saying in terms of Isaiah 61:1. So, all right, so next story. One of the so I, of course, speak to men's groups and church men's groups, ministry groups, and so I was speaking to one of our larger churches in Southern Oregon in my community to the men, and about birthday. And the head of the group comes up to me and afterward, because I'm signing guys up to do birthday. It takes about half a work day. And out west, we served 10,000 kids. We launched it in 2012. By 2015, we were serving 10,000 kids every year, hundreds of Christians going into the public schools. So, impact. And he comes up to me sheepishly afterward, and he says, I really don't think this is for me. I'm not comfortable with kids. My kid's fine, but I don't think other kids, are interested in me and what I have to say, and I don't know that I have much connection to them. And so I said, okay, I never, Holy Spirit pressure only. So I never pressure. I said, okay. Well, he comes back to me later. He said, I talked to my wife. Bless our wives. He said, I talked to my wife, and she thought it would be good for me to do. I love telling this story because it's so much to do with the movement. So he does birthday. He comes to me after birthday, and he goes, Bob, I could not believe it. I mean, the kids were so polite, and we were talking and joking, and they were thanking me and calling me sir, and, he was absolutely blown away. Now, what had happened? What had happened to him? You know the expression stronghold, right? I thought I was fragile my whole life, and turns out I'm Big Bone Bob, I mean, I had no idea, right? There's a barrier, strongholds, false impressions, lies that we come to believe. There was this barrier between him and young people. And I think that barrier is for a lot of us. We look, in the media and we think, kids, I don't know, what do I... That barrier was smashed because he listened to good advice of his wife, pushed through it, pushed through the fear, pushed through the false barrier, and found out, oh my gosh, I can bless these kids, and I am blessed by them. So that reality has so much to do with the essence of birthday, and that is expressing love from outside the boundaries of the child's knowing. And guess what? You end up being ministered to as well. So let's show the birthday video now, and then I'll finish up.
Founded in the Pacific Northwest in 2012, a movement created to inspire youth to value themselves is now spreading nationally. It's easy to forget how difficult a child's school years can be, whether in big cities or small towns, and what a profound influence those years can have on the lives of our children. Yes, times change, but kids really haven't. Most young people today are still trying desperately to fit in, while others are trying desperately to stand out. Yet all of them have a common need, the need to know they are loved, and that their life has value. So what if there was a simple way to tell thousands of young people exactly that? Well, there is, and we're doing it. It's called Birthday. On this day, we honor the unique gift of everyone's life by celebrating everyone's birthday. Community moms at the elementary and middle schools, and community dads at the high schools, all reaffirming kids with simple acts of kindness and ample supplies of ice cream. The message of birthday is a simple one. There has never been another you, and there never will be again.
When I first was thinking about it, I was like, I wonder how this is going to play out. And with the kids, you're like, it's not my birthday, but they all started to take to it. And that whole idea that you're special, you matter, you count. And it's like a day we're all going to celebrate this together.
And you raised literally the entire attitude of the whole school. Everybody was happier. Everybody was talking to each other. I saw kids interacting that hadn't interacted before. I saw them interacting with adults.
They live in a world right now where everybody wants something from them. So if someone's giving something to you, they expect that they have to give something back. And I think that they were surprised that here were a bunch of leaders in their community that were giving to them without asking anything back.
This wasn't a value-based piece where it's, okay, you have to earn this. It's, you were born, you get ice cream.
By our very presence, we also tell them that they have a purpose in this life, that we care about how they're doing, and that we've got the ice cream to prove it. So help us to create a joy-filled party this May 1st where everybody counts and no one is turned away. Find out more at birthday.org. Birthday. It's simple, it's fun, and we've got the smiles to prove it.
So from New York City to rural Southern Oregon, kids are kids. And they need love. They need to know they're loved. Even if they don't know God, they can get to sense Him through us. And NCS, after finishing up now, I just say that NCS, is a remarkable avenue of this, because each chapter represents different churches. And of course, you can invite guys who are not in NCS to join you and let them experience NCS in action. So I certainly hope that some of you are interested, or that your churches may be interested. I'm happy to talk to any of you about it. But thank you so much for your time. It's such an honor to be here, honestly, to speak to the founding chapter of NCS. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you. I forgot. This is my church, Redeemer East Side, Tim Keller's founding church in New York City, Redeemer of the Redeemer movement. They had me train the whole church staff, and they all did birthday together. And so this is, and you can see we had NYPD officers with us. We had 5 different NYPD. 3 of them were serving with us. 2 of them were on patrol and dropped by to see what was going on. And when they walked in the room, everyone cheered and applauded. And you should have seen the expression on their face, because you know what? Police officers need to know they're honored and respected too, which has so much to do with this whole movement, is just expressing love to each other and caring and honoring. So yeah, there it is. That's just last May 1st. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for that.